Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be diving into a topic that I think is fascinating to all of us, at least on some level.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think this one is something everyone has wondered about at some point or another.
Exactly. We're talking about near-death experiences.
Big topic.
It really is. And we're lucky enough to have gotten our hands on a really interesting research paper from the Lancet.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
It's a highly respected medical journal, and they did this really interesting study in the Netherlands all about near-death experiences.
Yeah, it's a good one. It really digs into what people actually experience when they're, close to death.
So I guess let's start there. What are we actually talking about when we say near-death experience?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people think of it as just like, waking up in a hospital bed after you almost didn't.
Right. Like, oh, I almost died. That was close.
Exactly. But a near-death experience, or like they call it in the study, an NDE, is actually way more than that.
Way more.
Yeah. The study defines it as like a reported memory of impressions during a special state of consciousness.
Okay, I'm already hooked.
Right.
So we're talking like out-of-body experiences.
That's one.
Okay.
Feelings of peace, like really intense peace, seeing a tunnel of light, maybe even meeting people who have already died.
Whoa.
Yeah, or even that life review thing you hear about sometimes.
I've heard about that, yeah. Like, are your whole life flashing before your eyes?
Yep, that's the one.
It's wild how consistent those themes are, right? Like, you hear about those elements in stories from all different cultures.
It's true. And it's not just a modern thing either. We're talking throughout history, all over the world, people have been describing these same elements in their NDEs.
So there has to be something to it, right? Like some underlying universal experience.
That's what's so fascinating, and that's one of the things that makes this Dutch study so interesting. It really tries to look at those common threads.
Okay, so back to the study. What makes it stand out from other research on NDEs? What did they do differently?
So a lot of studies on NDEs, they're based on people's memories, right? Which, memories can be fuzzy. They change over time.
Absolutely.
This study wanted to get those experiences as close to the event as possible. So they followed 344 patients in Dutch hospitals who had gone into cardiac arrest.
Cardiac arrest. So clinically dead then?
Exactly. Clinically dead. And they interviewed them, like, right after they were resuscitated.
Oh, wow. So they were getting those raw, immediate impressions.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there. They followed up with these patients years later.
So they could compare what they remembered right after with what they remembered years down the line.
Exactly. That's what they call a prospective study. And it makes the findings so much stronger.
Makes sense. So what did they find? I mean, did everyone who was clinically dead report having one of these experiences?
You would think so, wouldn't you? But no. Yeah, it's actually kind of surprising. Only 18% of the patients in the study said they had an NDE.
18%. That's way lower than I would have guessed.
Right. And here's another interesting thing. Age seemed to play a role. Younger people were more likely to report an NDE.
That's interesting. So it's not as simple as just like your brain being deprived of oxygen and misfiring, right? Because if that were the case, you'd expect to see a much higher percentage of people having NDEs, regardless of age.
That's exactly what makes these findings so compelling. It suggests there's something more going on here, something beyond just a straightforward physiological response.
Okay, so we've got this puzzle. People are clinically dead. Their brains should be offline, yet some are reporting these incredibly vivid and often life-altering experiences. What other clues does this study give us?
It really is like trying to piece together a puzzle, isn't it? And this study, it's like it gives us a few more pieces, but it also makes the puzzle even more complex.
How so? What else did they find?
Well, they dug into some specific cases, and some of them are just, well, they make you question everything you thought you knew about consciousness.
Okay, now you have to give me an example.
All right. So there's this one case in the study. I'll call it the mystery of the dentures.
The mystery of the dentures. Okay, you've definitely got my attention.
So picture this. You've got a man who's in a coma after cardiac arrest.
Okay.
He's been in this coma for weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then finally, he wakes up.
So he pulls through.
He does. But here's the thing. He starts telling the nurses, the doctors, everyone, about this incredibly detailed out-of-body experience he had.
No way. While he was in the coma.
While he was in the coma. He describes the room he was in, the equipment, even the nurse who was taking care of him.
And he's getting all this right.
He is. But then he said something even wilder. He remembers seeing the nurse remove his dentures.
Wait, hold on. He saw that from outside his body. He was watching this all happen.
That's exactly what he claimed. He said he was watching everything from above, and he even accurately described details that there's no way he should have known unless he was, well, conscious in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, I don't even know what to say. If his brain was truly offline, how could he have observed and remembered those details? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, does it?
And this isn't the only case like this. The study mentions several others where people reported seeing or hearing things that they couldn't have possibly perceived through their normal senses.
So what are we supposed to make of all this? Are we talking about, like, the soul leaving the body? Some
Yeah.
kind of astral projection?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This study, as rigorous as it is, it can't give us those answers. What it does do, though, is challenge us to think beyond our current understanding of what consciousness is, what happens when we die, the whole 9 yards.
It's easy to just dismiss these stories as hallucinations or something, but the level of detail, the consistency across different people's experiences, it makes you wonder. It really does.
Yeah.
And the researchers, they acknowledge that a purely physiological explanation like, oh, it's just the brain misfiring because of lack of oxygen, it just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, you'd think if that were the case, everyone who goes through cardiac arrest would have these kinds of experiences. But it's only a small percentage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that big question. If it's not just a physiological thing, then what is it?
I mean, what else could it be?
Well, that's a question for the ages, isn't it?
Right.
But, it's not just about figuring out what causes NDEs. The study also looked at the impact these experiences have on people's lives.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, you have to imagine that going through something like that, it would change you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the study found that these experiences can be deeply transformative, like fundamentally shifting how people see themselves and the world.
Transformative how? Like, what kind of changes are we talking about here?
Well, for one, a lot of people said they weren't afraid of death anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like they'd had this glimpse of what might be on the other side,
Right.
and it wasn't scary.
Huh.
Instead of dreading death, they saw it as more of a peaceful transition.
That's pretty profound.
It is, right? And a lot of them talked about feeling more empathy for others, like they had this greater understanding of just how precious and interconnected life is.
That makes sense.
Like the experience really opened their hearts,
Yeah.
and they started making changes in their own lives too.
What kind of changes?
Well, a lot of them realized that things they used to prioritize, like work or material possessions, they just didn't seem as important anymore.
Hmm.
Instead, they started focusing more on relationships, personal growth,
Yeah.
things that really mattered to them deep down.
So it's like this near-death experience, it kind of recalibrated their whole outlook on life.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's like they got a second chance to live their lives more authentically, more in line with their values.
That's incredible. You know, when we started this deep dive, I thought we might come out with more concrete answers, but it seems like the more we learn about near-death experiences, the more questions we have. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree. It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's still so much mystery out there, so much we don't understand about consciousness and what happens after we die.
It's kind of humbling in a way.
It is. It reminds us to stay curious, to keep asking questions, to not be afraid of the unknown. And who knows, maybe someday we'll have some of those answers. But until then, it's fascinating to explore these big questions and to consider all the possibilities.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into near-death experiences, I think the biggest takeaway for me, and hopefully for everyone listening, is that there's still so much we don't know about life, death, and what lies beyond. But this study, with its incredible findings and these amazing personal accounts, it reminds us to approach these mysteries with a sense of wonder and an open mind.
Absolutely. And to remember that sometimes the most important questions are the ones we may never fully answer.
Very true. To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and left you with something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the unknown.